The storm raged outside, its fury shaking the trees and blanketing the forest in a thick layer of snow. Inside his secluded cabin, Mark sat hunched over his laptop, the screen glaring back at him with a blank page. The cursor blinked relentlessly, a silent reminder of the writer's block that had plagued him for months. The cabin, once his refuge from the chaos of the world, now felt suffocating in its silence. The only sound was the wind howling like a wounded beast. Then, faintly, he heard it, a soft scratching at the door. Mark froze, his fingers pausing above the keyboard. No one ever came out here. He had chosen this remote spot precisely for its isolation. The scratching came again, this time accompanied by a faint whimper. It wasn't human. He stood, the chair scraping against the wooden floor, and grabbed the flashlight from the table. The power had gone out an hour ago, leaving the fire in the hearth as his only source of warmth and light. He approached the door cautiously, his breath visible in the icy air. When he opened it, the wind nearly tore the door from his hands. There, on the porch, stood a German shepherd. Her fur was matted with snow and ice, her ribs visible beneath her thin coat. Behind her, two tiny pups huddled together, shivering violently. The mother dog lifted her head, her eyes locking with Mark's. In that moment he saw something desperate, something pleading. "Help us," her gaze seemed to say. Mark's heart ached. He had never owned a dog before, but he couldn't leave them out in the cold. Without a second thought, he stepped aside and gestured for them to come in. The German shepherd hesitated, then gently nudged her pups forward. The little ones stumbled on unsteady legs, tumbling into the warmth of the cabin. Mark shut the door against the storm and turned to assess his unexpected guests. The mother dog stood protectively over her pups, her eyes wary but grateful. Mark grabbed some old blankets from the closet and arranged a makeshift bed by the fireplace. He filled a bowl with water and set it down, watching as the dogs drank eagerly. "You're safe now," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring them or himself. Over the next few days, Mark's life began to change in ways he hadn't anticipated. He named the mother Grace, for her quiet strength, and the pups Max and Mia, for their boundless energy. Grace was calm and watchful, always keeping an eye on her pups and Mark. Max was the adventurous one, exploring every nook and cranny of the cabin, while Mia was more reserved, content to curl up by the fire. For the first time in months, Mark found himself smiling. The dogs brought a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he was missing. He started writing again, the words flowing more easily now, as if the dogs had unlocked something inside him. But as the days passed, Mark noticed something odd. Grace would often sit by the window, staring out into the woods with a tense expression. Sometimes, she would growl softly, her ears twitching as if she heard something Mark couldn't. He dismissed it as her protective instincts, but a flicker of unease lingered in the back of his mind. One evening, as Mark was typing on his laptop, Grace suddenly stood up, her ears perked. She let out a low growl, her body rigid. Max and Mia, sensing their mother's tension, hid behind her, whimpering. Mark's heart raced. He hadn't heard anything, but Grace's behavior was unmistakable. Before he could react, there was a knock at the door. Mark froze. No one ever came out here. The knock came again, louder this time. Grace's growl deepened, and she positioned herself between Mark and the door, her teeth bared. Mark grabbed the fireplace poker, his grip tight, and approached the door cautiously. He opened it just a crack, the cold air rushing in. Standing on the porch was a man, his face hidden under a hood. His breath came in visible puffs, and his hands were shoved deep into his coat pockets. "Can I help you?" Mark asked, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The man's eyes flicked past Mark, landing on Grace and the pups. "I'm looking for my dogs," he said, his voice low and gravelly. A German shepherd and 2 pups. They ran off during the storm. Mark's stomach dropped. He glanced at Grace, who was still growling, her body tense. Something about the man's tone set off alarm bells in his mind. He forced himself to stay calm. "I haven't seen any dogs," Mark lied. "You should check somewhere else." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Mark thought he might argue. But then he simply nodded and turned away, disappearing into the night. Mark closed the door, his hands trembling. He knelt beside Grace, who immediately relaxed, licking his hand as if to say, "Thank you." The encounter left Mark shaken. He couldn't shake the feeling that the man was dangerous. The next morning, he decided to investigate. He called the local animal shelter and described the man. The woman on the other end of the line gasped. "That sounds like Carl," she said. "He's been on our radar for a while. We suspect he's involved in dog fighting. He's been stealing dogs from the area, but we've never been able to catch him." Mark's blood ran cold. He realized that Grace and her pups had likely escaped from Carl's clutches during the storm. By taking them in, he had unknowingly saved them from a horrific fate. But now Carl knew where they were. Mark contacted the authorities, who launched an investigation. Over the next few days, Mark's cabin became a hub of activity. Officers came and went, asking questions and setting up surveillance. Grace, Max, and Mia stayed close to Mark, sensing the tension. One night, as Mark sat by the fire with Grace at his feet, he thought about how much his life had changed in such a short time. He had started out as a recluse, content to live in solitude. But the dogs had brought him out of his shell, reminding him of the importance of connection and compassion. A few days later, the authorities caught Carl red-handed trying to break into Mark's cabin. He was arrested and his operation was shut down. Dozens of dogs were rescued from his property, many of them malnourished and injured. Mark was hailed as a hero, but he didn't care about the recognition. All that mattered was keeping Grace, Max, and Mia safe. In the end, Mark adopted the dogs, and they became his constant companions. Grace never left his side, her loyalty unwavering. Max and Mia grew into strong, playful dogs, filling the cabin with laughter and joy. Mark's writing flourished, and he even started venturing into town more often, no longer afraid of the world outside his cabin. But he often thought about that night, the night he opened his door to strangers and unknowingly stepped into a dangerous world. It was a decision that changed his life forever, and he knew he'd do it all over again. Months passed, and life at the cabin settled into a new rhythm. Mark's book, inspired by his experiences with Grace, Max, and Mia, became a bestseller. He used the proceeds to start a foundation dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating dogs from abusive situations. The foundation quickly gained traction, and Mark found himself traveling to speak at events and fundraisers. Grace, now fully recovered and thriving, became the mascot of the foundation. Her calm demeanor and gentle nature made her a favorite at public appearances. Max and Mia, always full of energy, delighted children at adoption events, their playful antics bringing smiles to everyone they met. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mark stood on the porch of his cabin, watching as Grace, Max, and Mia played in the yard. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke. He felt a deep sense of contentment, something he hadn't known was possible. As he watched the dogs chase each other through the fallen leaves, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. It had started with a simple act of kindness, opening his door to 3 strangers in need. That decision had not only saved their lives but had also given him a new purpose. Mark smiled as Grace trotted over to him, her tail wagging. She sat at his feet, looking up at him with those same trusting eyes that had met his on that stormy night. He knelt down and scratched behind her ears, feeling a surge of gratitude. "We've come a long way, haven't we, girl?" he said softly. Grace leaned into his hand, her warmth a reminder of the bond they shared. Max and Mia bounded over, their tongues lolling as they pounced on each other in a playful tussle. Mark laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet woods. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he also knew he wouldn't face them alone. With Grace, Max, and Mia by his side, he felt ready for whatever the future held. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the cabin, Mark felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had found his place in the world, and it was here, in the quiet of the woods, with his loyal companions by his side. And so, the man who had once been a recluse, hiding from the world, became a beacon of hope, not just for the dogs he saved, but for anyone who had ever felt lost or alone. His story was a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. If you liked the video, subscribe the channel, like and comment for more interesting videos.